Welcome to the second edition of Threads of Folk Art project that we're doing, the Hello Spring Stitch Along. The next three blocks are the carrot blocks, the bunny blocks, and the egg blocks. And I want to talk to you a little bit about each one of them, just some little tips. In your pattern for the carrot block, it tells you to cut these little strips 1/4 of an inch wide, but that's too wide. I have learned since doing it. So what I did is I just took my little 3x6, now this is a different piece of green, and I just started cutting little strips, and they're closer to probably 3/8 of an inch, so you get enough of them. And then when you're stitching them down, you'll tuck them under there, haphazardly lay them the way you want. I did a running stitch up part way. Even if there was a kink in it, I would just stitch a running stitch down it just to hold those down. So they're secured, but the ends are free. So that's your tip on the carrot block. But the 1/4 inch will be too wide if you cut them that way. So that takes care of that block for you. On the bunny block, the only challenge maybe I would say is when you have to turn this tube inside out. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I used a pencil to shove it up and slide it through. Anybody that has ever made a little tie or anything works real well. You'll all have a little butterfly charm in your kit to go with your bunny. They are all different colors because that's just the way they come. So look for that in your kit. And then the egg block is a little more challenging, but I have a couple tips for you. The purple egg, and in your directions on that one, you have full size layouts for placement of these things. The purple egg, when I went to work on it, I would lay it down on the egg, think, okay, that's where this little flower goes. Lay that one on. Lay this one here. These are the only 3 applique pieces that are on it. This one goes here. And then I fused those on. Next on that block, just by visual, I would use my Allery chalk marker and know that this line is roughly here. So I would just come in and chalk a line. These don't have to be perfect. You can put them in a totally different placement if you want to. Just draw your lines on to stitch. You know, add your leaves. Just have some fun with it. Nothing has to be perfect. Then we threw some swirls in, some stems. I'm getting a little big on my chalk marking here. But just look at your graphics, draw lines where you want. Because it's dark purple, the chalk marker really works well for that. So that's your purple egg. The teal colored egg, there's really not a lot to give you tips on other than I started with a French knot in the center, and I looked at my first set of lazy daisies and thought 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then came back and put another one in between them, put one long stitch in them. And those are nice, big, loose, lazy daisies. Then I continued just dropping a French knot with 3 lazy daisies between each one of those units. And then again, the 3rd row around, did the same thing. This I did take a marker and just kind of chalk the scallop, which is then done with a chain stitch, a lazy daisy in between at the connection. So that's all there is on that one. This is the one that's a little more of a challenge. It is your burgundy egg. And I found, to get these lines on here, I took my peeled off piece of fusible, and then I laid it on my full-size pattern. I took a marker, sorry Wendy, I'm moving this, and I started drawing my oops, of course my marker's not going to work. I would draw my lines on, not very straight, And to do my first stitching line was this one. So then what I did is I cut my pattern on my line, took it to my egg, and I just put I don't have a pin right here, but I pinned it in place, and then I used my pearl cotton and I did my stem stitch and just stitched right along that edge. So then after I stitched that line, I cut my next one off, pinned it back on, and then that gave me my new stitching line, just stitching right along the edge of that. Came back, put my French knots in. Let's see, that egg, I did the same thing up here. I did the same thing for the bottom. So I pinned it on, stitched my double lines, which are there, put the French knots between them. Now to get these lines, I took this, folded it in half. So now I'm at the center. Again, I used my chalk marker and drew, well, these lines would have been stitched in here. Used my chalk marker, drew a line, stitched that one, and then just kept folding this paper back and drawing my next lines. I did chalk about every other line, and then I came back and stitched in between those lines instead of, because they're really close together. My chalk marks wide enough. I don't think you'd be able to chalk every single line, but it gives you a good reference line to stitch on then. This is illustrated. There's a really great illustration in your pattern. It's essentially a blanket stitch, but you're not catching the wool behind. You're just looping the threads onto each other. This is all free. It doesn't stitch down. So you stitch across, you loop back, catch that loop, keeping these loops loose, because in the very last row, you'll put a little tack stitch, pull tension on it, and that'll make it look like the fishnet. There's a lot of tutorials out on YouTube to look at that. It's called a detached buttonhole stitch, filler stitch. It's really made a fun application on there. You have your lazy daisies again in the center, some stem stitching there. So that is essentially some tips for you for the eggs. So that's what's going to be coming out in the mail. Some of them have started shipping. Of course, they ship a month after the first, when you put your order in. So you should be getting them real soon if you haven't gotten it yet. So here is your next edition.